Hey. Alright lads, today we are studying. Been avoiding this for months, but gotta come back to it. I really want to fix my mic though, like this, I can't hear shit from this. My hair is a bit wacky, but I genuinely can't hear anything from this.
This here is the kinetic energy of the carriage. Generalized coordinate.
Might work.
Okay, next Monday. Same thing. Go to your prac class and the test will be available in Moodle. We will only be testing you from week.
God damn! I really need to fix this headphone. It's so annoying. It's so soft. It's just old. I'm gonna put this little USB into the back. It's not even connecting now. That is even more quiet. Flip.
4, right up to week 6. Free and force vibration.
Oh, so soft.
1 degree of freedom. And we will only be talking about the single frequency stuff. Alright, so there's no multi-frequency excitation and there's no non-periodic forcing. Okay, so one question you have an hour to do, and it will be held in your prac class or during your prac class, so there'll be 2 groups. Okay?
Oh well.
Any questions about that? Yep. Sorry? Lagrange. Just use Lagrange. This coordinate system is used only, purely by convenience. Okay? And this is what our eyes actually see. Now, when it comes to principal coordinate, you find that this principal coordinate is particularly helpful when it comes to solution. Alright, so now, let's just say that you have this mechanical system. Now, you've got this bar, which has got a mass m and the moment of inertia about 0.0.
Hold on. Why is the Pomodoro not working? Oh, there it is. Alright, cool.
J subscript O connected by a spring, and then you have this mess. Now, if I ask you to determine the vibration response of this mechanical system, you will find you will know that this bar will rotate and this mass will move. All right. So in which case, because I need to establish a coordinate system against this system so that I can analyze its motion, and because I know that this bar will rotate and this mass will move, I can assign this as theta, what I've done here, and the mass motion I will describe it by this linear variable x. Now, if you look at the way that we have established this system, x and theta, these are only purely by convenience. Alright, this is what our eyes will actually see, and if I
How do I do that? How do I check master volume? Like that?
Hey everyone, welcome back to TechMesh. Today we are diving into a common issue that many Windows users face, low volume problems. I'm here to guide you through some troubleshooting steps to get your sound back to its optimal level. So let's jump right in. So the first thing you want to check is your external speakers if you are using them. Make sure that they are turned on and the volume is cranked up to the max. It's a simple step, but it is often overlooked. Now if you are still experiencing issues, let's dive deeper. For Windows users, head over to your control panel. So for that, just search for control panel in your Windows search box and then open your control panel. So in your control panel, make sure that the view by is selected to large icon, and then here you can see a sound icon. So just click on your sound icon. So after opening your sound icon here, just click
What? Detect the audio in hand before the phone device calling problem.
on the sound tab. In your sound option here, ensure that the correct playback device is selected. So here you can see we have multiple playback devices, so make sure to select your proper playback device and then just click on set default. So try experiment with other playback devices here and check if it solved your problem or not. Click on this communication tab at the top, and then here you can see it is selected to reduce the volume of other sound by 80%. So here just select do nothing and then hit apply and hit on OK. Again open your sound tab here and then here select the correct speaker and then select on properties and then click on levels, and here make sure that your volume is cranked up high. Then explore advanced settings. So here just click
Might
on
be a hardware
advanced.
thing, I
After
don't know.
clicking on advanced, here you can see default format. So here you can see it is selected 16-bit 48,000 Hz. So here you should see a drop down. For my case it is now grayed out. So if you can select it, then here you should see multiple options. So try each of these after or Windows. and then open the troubleshoot settings, and then here click on other troubleshooters. So here you can see the option audio, so just click on run here. Now wait for a bit and then follow the steps provided by the Windows default troubleshoot. Alright, and there you have it. So here you can see the option or troubleshoot settings, and then here click on other troubleshooters. So here you can see the option audio, so just click on run here. Now wait for a bit and then follow the steps provided by the Windows default troubleshoot. Alright, and there you have it, folks. With these simple steps you can now troubleshoot and fix the volume issue on your Windows computer. However, if you have tried everything and is still facing problem, it might be time to consider getting your speaker or your headphone checked or replaced. And hey, if you are in the market for a new speaker or headphones, consider using the affiliate links in the description. This channel running smoothly. And thank
I'm able to get a solution of this mechanical system in terms of theta and x. I'll be able to see how these things actually respond. Now, because there is a spring that connects this bar to this mass, you will find that the motion at this point is not going to be the same as the mass, unless this is rigid. Okay? So which means that theta and x in this case will not be related. Now, if we start off with this, you have a choice: use Newton's second law or Lagrange equation. But in our course, we will use Lagrange equation because Lagrange equation, as you will see, it will be actually very easy to. It's actually a very simple technique in which you can derive the equation of motion just purely by considering the energy of this system. Now, if I have decided that this is our generalized coordinate, theta and x, and because I want to use Lagrange equation to write the equation of motion, this is what I will need to do. Lagrange equation tells you that you will have to write you will have to describe what is the potential energy and the kinetic energy of this system now, because there's no damping, so we can neglect the dissipation energy part. So now, as we said before, when it comes to the kinetic energy, this is only accumulated by the masses. Okay, now in this case, you have the mass of the link and the mass m, which is this mass here. All right. Now, because this mass of the link, and if you notice, we have already said that this is going to be our generalized coordinate x and theta. Now, as far as a link is concerned, the kinetic energy I should be able to write it in terms of it's a polar moment inertia, and in this case it's about O. Okay, so half J naught theta dot square, that will be the KE of the link. Alright? Now, and then when it comes to the masses, I know that I've only got this mass to consider, and because I have attached the generalized coordinate x to describe the motion of this mass m, x dot will be its velocity, and in which case the KE of this mass m will just be half m x dot square. Alright, so now I have the kinetic energy of the system. Now the next thing is I will need to write the the potential energy. And as we said previously, the potential energy will be stored by springs, and because this bar, there's, you know, it is like a pendulum, and if it is a pendulum like, then the mass m will also be able to store energy, potential energy. Okay, unless this bar is supported by a spring, then we don't have to consider its the energy due to its position. But in this case, because this bar here is hanging free, like a pendulum, so in which case I will need the potential energy from the spring all right. If I assume that there is that theta is small, then you can see that this distance here, if I call this y, this here will be y. Okay, so x minus y will be the relative displacement between the mass and this point, which means that it's essentially the extension of the spring or the deformation of the spring. So this is the deformation of the spring. So if I square it, multiply by a stiffness, and then multiply by a half, this will be the potential energy that's stored by the spring. Yeah? Any questions with that? All right. And then the next thing is you have this quantity here, which is the potential energy of the mass m, big mass m. All right, which is the link. All right, let's assume that is because this is our positive direction. This here will be the change in height, 1 minus cosine theta, multiplied by a. Okay, where a is this distance here, is from the center of mass. Okay, so you can approximate this using small angle theta, and in which case your potential energy can be written in this form. Now, can you see this mechanical system? If you try and write the equation of motion using Newton's second law, I'm not saying that you can't do it, but it's just going to be very messy because there will be free body diagrams involved. Now, because I want to use Lagrange equation, which means that I only need to consider which are the elements that stores potential energy, which is essentially the masses, and which are the elements that will store the potential energy, which is essentially the spring. And if the mass, if this bar here is not is hanging like a pendulum, then you will need to consider the effects due to gravity. Yes.
So the bond over inertia you've taken about the bond rotation, right? J naught.
Yes.
Do we have to write that J naught in terms of the center of gravity, or can we just leave it in terms of J naught?
Oh, yeah. This is J naught. J naught is about this point. If you write it in terms of this,
Yeah.
then you will have plus half m mx bar square.
Should we do that to simplify it?
Yeah. You when you do this, you will have you will have considered this altogether. Yeah. Okay. Because the velocity at this point is 0.
So it would just be better just to take it about the bond rotation.
I would just do it at the point where there's 0 velocity. Just go there.
Start where it pivots.
Yeah. Okay, because it doesn't matter. When you consider this, you will end up with the same solution. Okay? All right? Now, if you look at the way that we're going to apply Lagrange equation, now if you look at this, our generalized coordinate, we have theta and x. Okay? So which means that when it comes to your Lagrange equation, look at this subscript I. In this case, the I will have 1 and 2. One could be theta, and the second one will be x. Okay, so in this case, I say Q1. Q1 well, 1 could be x and 2 will be theta. So Q1, if I consider Q1 to be equals to x and Q2 to be equals to theta, these are my generalized coordinate. So what that means is that first of all, I will need to consider
Bro, is that a fucking ad?
x, and then
Come on, bro.
I will consider theta and do the derivative with respect to, in this case,
Come on.
I'll do it with respect to x
No
dot
way, that's a
and x.
fucking ad.
And in this, in the second side of the equation, I'll do it in terms of theta dot and theta. So here,
You ruined it.
what I've done here is to consider the Lagrange equation with respect to my first generalized coordinate. In this case, it's x. And in this, over here, we are considering the Lagrange equation with respect to the second generalized coordinate. Theta. Okay, get it? Any questions? So you see, when you do all this derivative, you will have these terms and this term. And then what you do is, you put them back into your Lagrange equation, and there you have your first equation of motion. You do the same for the second generalized coordinate. All right? You assemble these terms here, and you have the second equation of motion. Now, I have done this using a different method over here. I have done the small angle approximation. And over here, I didn't do the small angle approximation. Okay, but you end up with the same answer. All right, this is just for your information. But what is important is that now notice that this is what we've got. When I consider my first generalized coordinate, this is my first equation, and then when I consider my second generalized coordinate, that is my second equation of motion. So what I have done is I have written them here, and this is the system of equation which describes the dynamic motion of this mechanical system. Now, in multiple degrees of freedom, we always assemble things in terms of matrices. Now, because we have a 2 degrees of freedom system, we have a 2 by 2 matrix here, mass matrix, and a 2 by 2 stiffness matrix. Okay, so same thing. If you look at the form of this equation, it is like m x double dot plus k, x dot, x and theta, yeah, you got the mass times acceleration plus the stiffness times the displacement. This must be equal to 0. Okay, yep.
Hold on, where's the minus KL? What?
Theta is here. Did I have a KL? Oh, sorry, this should be a KL here. There.
Yeah.
All right. There should be a K here, sorry. Yep.
One of the week 4 examples is like, so there's an example where you have x1, x2, x3, x4.
Yep.
That's multiple degrees of freedom as well, or not? Because you end up solving for x1.
Yes. Yes.
In that one.
Yes.
Is that multiple degrees of freedom?
No. Okay. Very good question. Thank you. Now, if you look at this, I have an x. So if I have this as my mechanical system, and this is connected rigidly to the mass m, I may think that I have a 2 degrees of freedom system, but in this case, x is also equals to L times theta. All right, so in which case, there is a correlation between theta and x, which means that now this thing, instead of being 2 degrees of freedom, is only 1. remember in the example, this is a rigid bar. x1, x2, and x3, they are defined by the distance L1, L2, and L3. Remember? Okay? So those displacements are linked to theta and L. So there's only one degree of freedom system. So the good thing about Lagrange is that if you were considering this, all right, and you say, okay, I'm going to treat this as a 2 degrees of freedom system, when you do your Lagrange or arranging all these Lagrange equations, you will find that using this, it will all reduce to a 1 degree of freedom system. You can actually write it in terms of theta or x. It's up to you. But in this case, degrees of freedom system, when you do your Lagrange or arranging all these Lagrange equations, you will find that using this, it will all reduce to a 1 degree of freedom system. You can actually write it in terms of theta or x. It's up to you. But in this case, because we have a spring here, the displacement at this point and the mass is going to be different, so which is why we have x and theta. All right, so use Lagrange, because if you can't see things clearly, Lagrange equation will help you. All right? Okay, now, why do we call this generalized coordinate? Now, if you look at this, these off-diagonal terms are not equal to 0. Now, what that means is that even when I am considering my generalized coordinate x, the things that's happening at theta actually will affect this equation of motion. And when you look at this, even though I was only considering theta, anything that's happening in the x direction will also contribute, which means that the whole system, in this case, x and theta, they are coupled. You can't separate them. One will affect the other, which means that if you want to solve this equation, it's not going to be trivial. Now, what we would like to do in the next part of this workshop, and I'll show you what are the technique that we can actually use. All right, and that's where we talk about the principal coordinate, where we can totally uncouple the mechanical system, such that this 2x2 system will become single degree of freedom system. Yes. 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 Yep. Okay. Any other? Look, just bear in mind that this is coupled and the solution is not trivial. But what we'll do is we'll talk about modal analysis later on in this workshop, and you'll see that there will be a technique that actually allows you to decouple the whole thing, and which is called principal coordinates. And that principal coordinate is really the property of that mechanical system. We'll talk about that a bit later. Okay, so. We'll have another example where we use Lagrange equation to derive the equation of motion of this system. Here I have, let's assume that this thing here is frictionless, okay? I have this this slider here, and the mass, mass or this cylinder, we actually rolls on, and let's assume that this is has got a non-slip condition. Okay, without slipping, and which means that this thing can roll like so. Now, and this is connected by K1 and K2, and this x1 and x2 in this case, these are the generalized coordinate that we're going to use. Now, if I use Lagrange equation to find the equation of motion, you find that the mathematics is actually very easy. Now, we're going to what we're saying is that this cylinder here will ride along this carriage, and there will be a no-slip condition, in which case you would expect this point here to move the x1, and if this is our coordinate x2, there will the relationship between its rotation of this the rotation of this mass will be equals to x2 minus x1 on r, where r is the radius of this cylinder. All right.
What? I don't get it. X1 is how much distance the circumference covers, and X2 is how much it moves in total. I don't see it. Okay, if this is rolling, if we pull this, what? Okay, I don't even know how this mechanical system works. It doesn't fucking work. How does that even work? So this reel rolls. It will stretch this frictionless. Let's imagine that being a fucking car, right? It will stretch this, but how would it stretch this independent body?
It's got a now, okay, and the potential energy will only be stored by our springs, in this case K1, and K2. All right. Now, if I consider the kinetic energy, now half mass x1, this here is the kinetic energy of the carriage. Okay, this here is the kinetic energy of the cylinder, its motion, and this is the kinetic energy of the cylinder about where J naught is about this point, and that is a rotational kinetic energy.
So the cylinder is moving, the cylinder is rotating. That's the two kinetic energies. And the kinetic energy of the body is just moving. That actually makes sense. That actually makes sense.
All right, but we know that theta and x1 and x2 are related by this equation.
Can you explain the equation again? Why you need x2 minus x1 over r?
Okay, now, okay. Now, if I look at this point here, right? This point moves with x1. Yeah? This point moves with x2. So as far as I'm concerned, this theta, the way it rocks, must be equals to x2 minus x1 on r, where r is the radius of this wheel. Yeah? Assuming that it's because x2 has to be different from x1. Because x2 is different from x1, it rocks. The cylinder will actually oscillate. Yeah?
So x2 is the motion
Of this center.
of the cylinder, right? And
Yes,
x1
yes, that's right, yes. Yeah? Any other questions? Yep.
It's the change in x1, not just the value of x1. It's like the value of x2 and x1, like as defined in the diagram. x2 is just a little bigger than x1, so it has to be the changes.
Yeah, this is the change. It's how x2 and x1 is, that's the relative motion. Yeah? All right. Yes. The generalized coordinate is because okay, I know that this is going to move, right? So I said this move by x1, and I know that this is going to move, so I say that this is x2. Yeah, you just put the if I have M1, M2, and then I have M3. Yeah? Because when it responds, this is going to move, this is going to move, and that's going to move. So I call this X1, X2, and X3. And this is only purely by convenience, which is why I call this my generalized coordinate. Okay? All right. So now, and then when it comes to the potential energy will only be carried by our springs K2 and K1, which this is the stretch of the spring K1, and that is, the stretch of the spring K2, which is why it's just K2 times x minus 1 whole thing squared. Okay? So now, what we have then is the potential energy and we have the kinetic energy. But what you will realize is that when we've derived this energy equation, we have generalized coordinate x1 and x2. X1 and X2.
Every time I start studying, I just want to see.
Okay, so now, what that means is that we will need to consider assembling a Lagrange equation with our first generalized coordinate x1. You do your derivative. For the potential, for the kinetic energy, and then you do the derivative for your potential energy. Similarly, you will need to consider x2, where you do your derivative for your kinetic energy and that for your potential energy. When you bring them together, this is what you get from your Lagrange equation. Again, if you look at this, you will have x1, even though you're only dealing with for the first equation with x1, where you're considering x1, x2 comes into play, which means that the whole system is coupled. Okay, and when you're dealing with the second equation of motion, you were only dealing with x2, but x1 comes into play, which means that the whole system of equation is coupled. And here, so in this case, this thing here will be the equation of motion. So this is my mass matrix, and that will be my stiffness matrix. And if you look at this, x1, x2, all right, and you find that all these things, these are all coupled, which means that in this, when you are applying the coordinate x1 and x2, anything that happens in x1 will affect whatever is happening in x2, and anything that's happening in x2 will also affect the motion of the mechanical system as defined by x1. All right, so this is how you derive the equation of motion. You have a seemingly complicated mechanical system. What you need to do is to isolate the components or the elements that will that stores kinetic energy. Isolate the components that store potential energy. Consider the generalized coordinate one at a time, and then you assemble the Lagrange equation, and you will get the equation of motion. All right. Okay. Any questions? Now, although we said that, when we are dealing with 1 degree of freedom system, we said that omega n is equal to square root k on m. But this is only because we have the equation only in x. Now, in a system of equation like this, because it is coupled, omega n will not be equals to square root k1 plus k2 on m plus m on 2. Please don't do that. Okay? I many times in the final assessment and the exams, people are still telling me that this diagonal here are the natural frequencies, and one look, I know the person hasn't been following any of our stuff. Okay, so don't do that. I will show you how to extract the natural frequencies in the second half of this workshop. Okay, any questions? So you can see that even when you're dealing with multi degrees of freedom system, the Lagrange equation will allow you to derive the equation of motion very, very easily. All you need to do is to work out which are the elements that will store potential energy, which are the elements that will store the kinetic energy. Determine for yourself what are the generalized coordinates you use, express the KE and the PE in terms of those generalized coordinates, do a derivative, assemble them, and this is what you get. Okay? All right? Any questions? Okay. Now, it is one thing to be able to determine or to be able to derive the equation of motion, but what we would like to do is, from the equation of motion, we want to solve them. Okay, because ultimately we want to determine the response of the dynamic response of this mechanical system. Now, for this particular course, we will introduce to you the concept of modal analysis. Now, these are the few steps that that I want you to get familiar with. I'll go through the two examples with you, and as we go along, I will show you how things are done. Okay, but what is important is the following. Now, this is the equation of motion that I started out with. This is the start. Okay, now x1 and x2, these are my generalized coordinate. Now, the sequence of the solution procedure is such that we will start off with x1 and x2 as our first generalized coordinate, and this is our equation of motion. Okay. What this Inman did was that he then introduced another generalized coordinate when he considered using the Cholesky decomposition to normalize this mass matrix. If you don't just have a look at Wikipedia about Cholesky decomposition. Okay, he used this method to normalize a mass matrix now, but in
I
order
actually need to sleep for a bit. Oh my god. What the actual fuck?
to do that, he need to define a new set of generalized coordinate. Now, when he does that, by doing this, you mass normalize the equation of motion, all right, such that this matrix now, when we say that mass normalized, which means that this is now a unity matrix or an identity matrix, okay? And this here is our so-called mass normalized stiffness matrix. This equation of motion is still in terms of the generalized coordinate Q1 and Q2. This is still generalized coordinate. Now, it is from this that he's able to determine. I'll show you how this thing is done with some examples. Now, Q1 and Q2, these are the solutions that we would expect in terms of sine and cosine functions. You differentiate it twice with respect to time, okay, to allow for this column matrix, and this here will be the equation that will allow you to find your natural frequency of the system. Now, these natural frequencies will also be known as eigenvalues. And when you use these natural frequencies and this equation to work out the corresponding eigenvectors, and you normalize it, you find that because of him using this Cholesky decomposition to normalize the mass, these normalized eigenvectors, they are orthogonal. All right. Now, what that means is that now this is where we started from. Okay, and this is the second, the next generalized coordinate. Now, because the eigenvectors are orthogonal, this property holds. The transpose of the normalized eigenvector multiplied by itself will be equal to an identity matrix. Now, he then say that I will now define a coordinate system R1 and R2 such that R1 and R2 is related to Q by this column vectors of the eigenvectors. Now, hang on. This here is known as our principal coordinate because if I now started with this equation, okay? I'm going to substitute the definition of the generalized coordinate with this. And now when you do that, you end up with a system of equation that looks like that. And suddenly, the off-diagonal terms will all be equal to 0, which means that this is no more coupling. which means that this system of equation is the decoupled equation of motion. Okay, and the diagonals in this case will be the square of the natural frequency. And this we can use this we can derive only when we consider the principal coordinate. And these are our principal coordinates, and the relationship between the principal coordinate and the xt is what we see. Okay, RT is what allows us to solve easily, because when you look at this equation of motion, when I expand this, it is essentially two equations. Now when I expand this, I have R1 double dot plus omega 1 square R1 to be equals to 0, and R2 double dot plus omega 2 square R2 to be equals to 0. My first natural frequency, my second natural frequency, and this is as though I have two times of 1 degree of freedom system. Okay, one in R1 and one in R2. I solve them because it is a 1 degree of freedom system. I know the solution very well. You know, really, it's very easy to code it up on your either your Excel spreadsheet or your any computational devices. I get this. All right. Now, what that means?
You have a mass matrix, you have a potential matrix.
Will motion, okay,
You put it into there.
is the following: that
Calculate the inverse of mass matrix, square root. You have the potential matrix. Inverse square root, potential inverse square root, mass analysis. Symmetric eigenvalue problem. The actual fact. Initial conditions.
life only when we consider the principal
Fine.
coordinate, and these I determine motion. Cholesky, these are my generalized coordinate. Now, the sequence of the solution procedure is such that we will start off with x1 and x2 as our first generalized coordinate, and this is our equation of motion. Okay. What this Inman did was that he then introduced another generalized coordinate when he considered using the Cholesky decomposition to normalize this mass matrix. If you don't just have a look at Wikipedia about Cholesky decomposition.
Don't think you just explain it to me, bro. Please, that's your job, sir.
Okay, he used this method to normalize a mass matrix now. But in order to do that, he need to define a new set of generalized coordinates. Now, when he does that, by doing this, you mass normalize the equation of motion, all right, such that this matrix now, when we say that mass normalized, which means that this is now a unity matrix or an identity matrix, okay? And this here is our so-called mass normalized stiffness matrix. This equation of motion is still in terms of the generalized coordinate Q1 and Q2. This is still generalized coordinate. Now, it is from this that he's able to determine. I'll show you how this thing is done with some examples. Now, Q1 and Q2, these are the solutions that we would expect in terms of sine and cosine functions. You differentiate it twice with respect to time, okay, to allow for this column matrix, and this here will be the equation that will allow you to find your natural frequency of the system. Now, these natural frequencies will also be known as eigenvalues. And when you use these natural frequencies and this equation to work out the corresponding eigenvectors, and you normalize it, you find that because of him using this Cholesky decomposition to normalize the mass, these normalized eigenvectors, they are orthogonal. All right. Now, what that means is that now this is where we started from. Okay, and this is the second, the next generalized coordinate. Now, because the eigenvectors are orthogonal, this property holds. The transpose of the normalized eigenvector multiplied by itself will be equal to an identity matrix. Now, he then say that I will now define a coordinate system R1 and R2 such that R1 and R2 is related to Q by this column vectors of the eigenvectors. Now, just hang on. This here is known as our principal coordinate because if I now started with this equation, okay? I'm going to substitute the definition of the generalized coordinate with this. And now when you do that, you end up with a system of equation that looks like that. And suddenly, the off-diagonal terms will all be equal to 0, which means that this is no more coupling. Which means that this system of equation is the decoupled equation of motion. Okay, and the diagonals in this case will be the square of the natural frequency. And this we can use. This we can derive only when we consider the principal coordinate. And these are our principal coordinates. And the relationship between the principal coordinate and the xt is what we see. Okay? RT is what allows us to solve easily because when you look at this equation of motion, this equation of motion, when I expand this, it is essentially two equations. And when I expand this, I have r1 double dot plus omega 1 square r1 to be equals to 0, and r2 double dot plus omega 2 square r2 to be equals to 0. My first natural frequency, my second natural frequency, and this is as though I have two times of 1 degree of freedom system. Okay, one in R1
No, I'm
and
not
one in
concentrating. I need to go to sleep. I need to have a nap for 10 minutes. I'm on caffeine overload today. Fuck. Well, legit, have a cup of coffee here still. There's still coffee in it. But I needed something refreshing. Gets me up straight away. Alright, let's just study this shit.
Solve them because it is a 1 degree of freedom system. I know the solution very well. You know, really, it's very easy to code it up on your either your Excel spreadsheet or your any computational devices. I get this. In order to now, our eyes can't see R1 and R2. Our eyes can only see X. So in order to bring it back to X, that is the equation that we use, and there is a special meaning for this. This is known as the mode shape. I'll go through some examples with you, and you know, this is a story. What we're trying to do is we're trying to express our equation of motion in the generalized coordinate by making use of the properties of this system. You look at this. The natural frequency, these are our eigenvalues, or related to our eigenvalues. The eigenvalues are the characteristic values for the mechanical system. And from these eigenvalues, I have these eigenvectors. Okay, there's a special meaning for these eigenvectors. We'll talk about it a bit later. But these eigenvectors, again, they are the characteristic vectors of the mechanical system. And if this is a characteristic of the mechanical system, what I have done over here is to use the characteristic of the system to define a set of coordinate axes R1 and R2, and this we call our principal coordinates. And because of this, I'll be able to totally decouple the system and turn this coupled system into 1 degree of freedom system, which I can solve very easily. I'll go through some examples with you, but this is what we're trying to do. Okay, yeah, you got a question? Okay.
How do you get to the eigenvectors from the...
Yeah, no, I'll go through some examples with you. Yep. Okay, but this is what we are trying to do. Now, when you
Why do you, sorry,
yeah,
why do you bother going the same as writing out I, R1, double dot, you know, whatever that is?
this one here.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, sorry, the one on the right, my right. So just that last part, the R.
This one?
Principal coordinate equation, yeah, that one.
Uh-huh.
When, like, for example, would you ask the test, give me the principal coordinate equation? Yeah. What about x of t, that last one?
Yep.
That as well, that's the mode shape equation?
This is the solution in your physical space.
Okay.
Yeah, because
In terms of the principal.
that's right. Yeah, the principal coordinate will allow us to solve the problem very easily and efficiently. But this is our physical space, and this is what we see. Unless you've got very special eyes that you're able to see the... If you look at this, the relationship between the physical space and the principal coordinate is just a linear combination of the two. Okay, and this is all linked to the mode shape. Okay, we'll go through some examples, and just keep it as the back of your mind. When we go through some examples, it will be the secret will all be revealed. Okay? Take a 10-minute break, and then we'll go through some need to consider eight numerical. Okay, now let's look at the example. What I've prepared for you is some typed out stuff that is related to the steps that I've highlighted here. Okay, so what this feels like is essentially what we talked about in the previous slides. But what I like to do is to go through this method of solution with you with some numerical examples, and hopefully you'll be able to see the workings and why we do what we are doing. Okay, so we have this these two, well, they call it subway cars, but it's essentially just trams. And this is connected by a coupler. Okay, and because it will have a certain amount of stiffness, and in this case, this will model this thing as a spring with a stiffness of 280. Okay, 280,000 newtons per meter, and we are told that each of these cars has a mass of 2,000 kilograms. Okay, we are asked to find equation of motion and then calculate the natural frequencies and the mode shapes. Now, natural frequency, you know, mode shape really is to tell you how the two systems
Hello.
with one another when
How are you going? How are you going?
Okay, so now
Are you still studying these days?
I will also
Or they're almost holays? It's almost holidays here.
couple the
Only have one more exam left, and then we're done.
If you're asked to find the dynamic motion of this thing, you know that assuming that you're not interested in the deformation of the car itself, and you're only interested in how the two cars move relative to one another. Now you will automatically then say that, look, I will use x1 and x2 to represent the motion of car 1 and car 2 respectively. Now if you note how we decided on this coordinate, it is purely by convenience, and essentially this is what our eyes will see.
Well, you guys are just starting back classes.
Okay? So
Oh,
this
man.
here is our generalized.
How many classes do you have? Do you have 4 units like us every semester?
Now the equation of motion is actually quite
And what
simple.
classes are you
Again,
enrolled in?
I'll use Lagrange equation because I have x1 and x2 as my generalized coordinate. I know that as far as the kinetic energy is concerned, it is the masses that will store the kinetic energy, and in this case,
Yep.
it will just be half m1 x1 dot square, and then for m2 will be half m2 x2 dot square.
Yep.
Now, as far as
Kinetic
potential
energy is
energy,
masses.
the potential energy we say that is stored by
Potential
the
is
springs.
kinetic K.
All right. Now, if you look at the way that you have chosen to represent the motion of these two cars, surely the stretch of this spring must be equal to
X2
x1
minus
x2
x1.
or x2
Yep.
minus x1. Doesn't matter which way you choose, because you're squaring it. Okay, so you expand it. So now I have my kinetic energy and my potential energy. Now notice that in this example, we are we still have x1 and x2. So, which means that when we are assembling our Lagrange equation, we have to consider x1 and x2 separately.
Okay, so t is 1 squared half. So it's half mv squared. x2 dot squared. V is a half k x2 minus x1 whole thing squared.
And assemble the Lagrange equation or the equation of motion accordingly. So here is the derivative that I have done when considering x1, and over here
X1, so t delta cap t, and then t delta t cap x2. So this is mx dot 1, mx dot 2, m1, m2, and also delta v delta x1, delta v delta x2, x1, this is a half k x2 squared minus 2x1 x2 plus x1 squared. So x1 half k 2x1 minus 2x1 x2. So half k 2x2 minus 2x1. Simplify kx1 minus kx2, kx2 minus kx1. Yep. So in combination m1 x dot 1, the plus, right? Yeah. Oh my god, I might jump in the pool. Holy shit. I'm gonna sleep again. You're in first year, got 3 main subjects: anatomy, I can't spell, physiology, biochemistry. Every day. Wait, do you actually have class every day? From 9 to 4. For uni. For only 3 units. That's cooked. That's cool. I feel so lucky now. I only have like, god damn. Fuck, I only have like what currently I go to uni only like Thursday for 4 actual uni studies and classes. Thursday, that's only from 12 to 4. That's like the only thing I have to go into to get marks, to get attendance marks. Of course, there's like other things I can go into, but I can't be fucked going into it. And then Friday and Monday are going for my own thing, like my own startup and stuff. Wow, 9 to 4 every single day. That's like high school all over again. Fuck. How are you feeling? Like, are you excited for it? How are you feeling for it? I guess if you like go from high school, something like, I don't know, 7 to 3, that was the time here, back when I had high school, and then you go into something like a 9 to 4, it wouldn't be too bad. But if I'm going back to high school time now, oh, I can't do it. I can't do it. Yeah, I guess med school is tough. I'm glad there's not like an engineering school. Oh, fucking. not be able to do it, not be able to go through it.
I have done the same, but now I consider my generalized coordinate x2. Alright, so by doing that, I have these two equations of motion. Now again, notice that when I consider x1, x2 comes into play as well. And when I'm considering x2, x1 comes into play. Which means that just by using this generalized coordinate purely by convenience, I have a system of equation which is coupled. Alright, so which means that I can't just pick up my natural frequencies of this system by just considering the diagonal terms. I have to do something a bit different, and which is our system by
Turn it to a matrix.
just considering the diagonal terms. I have to do something a bit different, and which is our modal analysis steps. As we now, I don't know why I put two. Anyway, let's forget about this. Let's just say that this is 27000 Newton per meter. Okay. So this is the mechanical system that we're dealing with. All right, and we have this is the equation of motion that we have derived. So now I'm going to put the numbers in. Okay, so what I like to do is to use the approach that is been given in the text to find the natural frequency, the mode shape, and to show you how to decouple the equation. Now, the first step tells us that we have to use our Cholesky decomposition to work out what is the square root of this mass. So this is our inverse square root
Okay,
of
this
the
is
mass,
easy.
and this is the square root of the mass matrix. As far as this, have a look at now. In the final assessment, if you do get a question like this, I will only require you to use it. I do not need you to do any more of those Cholesky decomposition. Okay, just make sure that you know these two equations of or how to calculate your inverse square root and the square root of your mass matrix. Okay, so this is what you do. Now that I've done this, okay, the next step tells me that I need to determine what is my mass normalized stiffness matrix. Now, this matrix here is essentially this. All right, and I'll need to pre and post multiply my stiffness matrix as it is in the equation of motion, okay, that you have derived, by the inverse square root of the mass matrix. So this is what it is. Now, in doing so, we are saying that now we will define a new coordinate system. Q1, this is still our generalized coordinate. And this is the generalized coordinate that we, in terms of the x1 and x2, where we have modified x1 and x2 by one of the matrices. Okay, in this case, this matrix here is the inverse square root of the mass m, which we obtained from the Cholesky decomposition. All right, so I'm still dealing with this generalized coordinate. So what this allows me to do is to rewrite this equation of motion in terms of Q1 and Q2. Now I have this here as an identity matrix, which means that now I have normalized the mass, and this matrix here will be the normalized stiffness matrix, which is this step here, step number 2. All right.
I mean, I could just skip all of that and just calculate the normalized
Now that
stiffness
I've got
matrix.
this so-called mass normalized equation of motion, I will be in a position to move on to step number 3, which is to calculate to calculate the natural frequencies or pick up the eigenvalue of this problem. Now, I have rewritten here the mass normalized equation of motion. Okay, now this is still coupled because the off diagonal term is not equal to 0. Now, because this thing is written in terms of Q1 and Q2, I can, and because this is a second order differential equation, I can say that Q1 and Q2 must vary with time in terms of a sinusoidal function. You can either use sine or cosine, doesn't matter. Because this requires us to differentiate the displacement function, which is Q1 and Q2 with respect to time twice to get acceleration. This is what it is. Alright, so you have this negative omega square. You substitute this into the mass term, this is what you get. Now, and then you take out the amplitude A and B, you end up with this system of equation. Now,
Hold on. What the fuck? So Q1 omega Q dot A B sine plus omega
if you look at this system equation, whatever is on the left hand side multiplied by AB must be equal to 0. One of the possible solutions is both A and B to be equal to 0, but that is, although it is mathematically admissible, but that's not what we want. We want to be able to find values of omega such that this system of equation will be valid.
what the fuck?
And to find those omega, you put the determinant of this matrix to be equal to 0, and you end up with a quadratic in terms of omega square. Okay. Now, if you remember from your mathematics, this is like looking out for the eigenvalues. The eigenvalues are the characteristic values of the system or the property of the system. And in this case, because this here omega is related to the motion that we've assumed, so what that means is that when we are able to find the values of omega such that this equation of motion will be satisfied, those omegas will be our natural frequency. Alright, so you solve this quadratic equation and it appears that the first eigenvalue is equal to 0, which is fair enough because you have a system which is not constrained. So what that means is that the car 1 and car 2, or M1 and M2, will move together in the same direction with the same amplitude, okay, where the frequency is 0. But then omega 2 turns out to be 16.03, about 16 radians per second. Now let's have a look.
Minus eigenvalue square minus 1, 2, 8 plus 7 whole thing squared in third.
Look at what it means, all right? So we've done this, and because this is our characteristic value, we call this our natural frequency, because omega is defines how the system is going to respond as a function of time. So the next thing is, now that we have this, we need to find the eigenvector, because for every eigenvalue there must be an eigenvector. Eigenvalue is the characteristic value and then for this you have an eigenvector, and this vector will tell you how the system actually responds. Let's have a look at what it means. Now, this is a system equation that we were considering when we were trying to pick out the values of omega to satisfy this equation. Now, I'll just use this, our first equation. Doesn't matter which equation you use. Okay, so if I consider the top row, and the top row, this is what I have. So 128.75 minus omega squared A must minus 128.75 B must be equal to 0. Now this here forms the basis of our eigenvector. Okay, so A on B must be equal to this. So now for omega 1 to be equal to 0, because this is our first eigenvector, eigenvalue. For omega to be equal to 0, it tells you that A on B must be equal to 1. Okay, so if I allow B to be equal to 1, then A will also be equal to 1. So because I have arranged A and B in a column vector like this, so 1 and 1, so this here will be my first eigenvector. We'll talk about the implications of this eigenvector a little bit later. Okay, but no. If when B is equals to 1, then A must be equals to 1. If B equals to 1, A must be equals to 1. Yeah? From this equation. If A on B equals to 0.5, so when B is equals to 1, A will be equals to 0.5. Yeah. Okay? You always go for B equals to 1. Okay? So now the technique or the steps proposed by Inman requires us to normalize our eigenvector. So here I have my first eigenvector. Work out the magnitude, which is equals to square root 2, divided by square root 2 on top and bottom, and this here will be my normalized first eigenvector. Then I do the same for my second eigenvalue. My second eigenvalue is associated with the natural frequency of 16 radians per second. Now when you put omega 2 to be equal to 16 radians per second into this equation, which is the basis for eigenvector, A on B is equal to negative.
Hello? Bro.
Per per second into this equation, which is the basis for eigenvector, A on B is equals to -1. So when B is equals to 1, A will be equals to -1. So see? So -1, 1. Now this here will be the eigenvector for my second eigenvalue. Again, I want to normalize it. So divided by the magnitude of this vector. Here I have -1 and 1 on square root 2. Okay, so this here will be my first eigenvector associated with my first eigenvalue. Here is my second eigenvector associated with my second eigenvalue, and this here is my normalized eigenvector. Now that I have completed step number 4, I will now move on to step number 5, which tells us to calculate what this mode shape vector is. Now the mode shape vector requires you to pre-multiply our normalized eigenvector matrix with the inverse square root of the mass matrix. Okay, so this is our mode shape. The inverse of this is the inverse square root of a mass matrix, and this here is our normalized eigenvector. So here, this is my mode shape for omega 1, and this is my mode shape for omega 2. Now, what do we mean by mode shape? Now, if you look at this, for mode number 1, A on B is equals to 1 because this is both equals to 1, right? So for the first eigenvector, which is omega 1 to be equals to eigenvalue, mass m1 and mass m2 must move in phase, okay? Because when mass m1 moves by 1 unit, mass m2 will also move by 1 unit because B is equals to A. Now, when it comes to the second natural frequency, omega 2, A on B, if you look at this, is equals to -1. So, what that means is that when mass m1 moves by 1 unit, mass m2 moves also by 1 unit, but in the opposite direction, which means that this is out of phase. Okay, so this is how you represent or you present the mode shape, and this is what the mode shape vectors actually tells you. How the system will actually move relative to one another. Alright? Pre-multiply our normalized eigenvector matrix with the inverse square root of the mass matrix. Okay, so this is our mode shape. The inverse of this is the inverse square root of a mass matrix, and this here is our normalized eigenvector. So here
1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, this is 8.
This is my mode shape for omega 1, and this is my mode shape for omega 2. Now, what do we mean by mode shape? Now, if you look at this, for mode number 1, A on B is equals to 1 because this is both equals to 1, right? So for the first eigenvector, which is omega 1 to be equals to eigenvalue, mass m1 and mass m2 must move in phase, okay? Because when mass m1 moves by 1 unit, mass m2 will also move by 1 unit because B is equals to A. Now, when it comes to the second natural frequency, omega 2, A on B, if you look at this, is equals to -1. So, what that means is that when mass m1 moves by 1 unit, mass m2 moves also by 1 unit, but in the opposite direction, which means that this is out of phase. Okay, so this is how you represent or you present the mode shape, and this is what the mode shape vectors actually tells you. How the system will actually move relative to one another. All right? Any questions? Yep. No. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Believe me. Because when you square this thing, this is going to cancel with this. All right. Okay. I'll show you another example where it's not equal to 0. Okay. So now, remember, this here is our definition of. This is where we started. Okay, we've assumed Q1 and Q2 from by modifying our generalized coordinate by the inverse square root of the mass matrix. All right. Now, and as we said, because I have now got my normalized eigenvector, I will define my principal coordinate R1 and R2 such that Q1 and Q2.
Hey Lily, how are you going? It's been a while. Been a while.
R1 and R2. So
I'm not almost done with
do
exams. Oh, this is
is
the
we are
last
defining
topic we're studying. And then we
set
take the
coordinate
exam and we're
system.
done with the year. Let's go.
that is dependent
How are you though? Are you still studying right now? Or are you almost done
on
as
its
well?
characteristic vector. And what we mean by that is if you look at the way our characteristic vector actually tells us, it tells us how the system will move, will respond. So what we're saying is that, look, I will define a set of coordinate system R1 and R2 to take those system response into consideration. All right? So now that if I'm able to do this, what that means is that if I now substitute this back into this equation, or into my equation of motion, this is what I've started with. My mass normalized equation of motion in terms of Q1 and Q2. And if I now substitute my definition of Q1 and Q2 into this equation, this is what I have. I then pre-multiply everything by the transpose of the normalized eigenvector matrix. And guess what? When you do this, you will
Yeah.
end up with a system equation that looks something like this, because this will be equal to the identity matrix, and this pre-multiplication here will give you omega 1 squared 0 0 omega 2 squared. Okay, now I have done this thing for you here. this here is the vector multiplication between the transpose of the normalized eigenvector matrix. This is our mass, normalized mass, then multiplied by the normalized eigenvector, you get unity or identity matrix. And then when I do the same for this, okay, which is this operation here, I have this. Now when I bring them all together, this is what, see? Omega 1 to be equals to 0, or omega square 1 to be equals to 0, omega square 2 to be equals to 257.14. And when you do your square root, you find that this here will give you a natural frequency of, and this is 1 degree of freedom system in R1 and R2, and you can solve this very easily. Okay, so by doing this, because I have this system equation, I know I've already gone through my damp free vibration, 1 degree of freedom. Let's assume that there's no damping. I know the solution. I can actually code this solution up and give me R1 and R2. I'll go through some examples with you next week where we actually solve this system equations. Okay? So this thing here, this equation is now totally decoupled. Why? Because the off axis, if you look at this equation, this is all in terms of R1 and this is all in terms of R2. The R1 and R2 doesn't interfere with one another. They are mutually independent. Alright? So, now, having solved things in R1 and R2, and if I want to bring it back into our physical space, okay, so I've solved this. To bring it back into physical space, I'll need to pre-multiply the solution I get from the principal coordinate by its mode shape matrix. And that's as simple as that. I know that there's it may be hard to follow initially, but if you follow the steps, it is actually very straightforward. Okay, and I've given you kind of like a, I hate to say this, but it's like a recipe. Okay, you just do it one step at a time as long as you know what you're doing. But it's important to know why you solve for the eigenvalues and why you solve for the eigenvectors. Okay, and you need to normalize your eigenvectors. Okay. Any questions? Look, I'm just going to go through this next example with you, and this is the next example where both omega 1 and omega 2 will not be equal to 0. Alright, now I have this structure here which is supported by two springs K1 and K2, and I want to find the principal modes of vibration, which means I want to find the mode shapes. Okay, and I will also determine, I will also be able to find the natural frequencies, and most importantly, I will want to decouple this equation of motion using my principal coordinates, R1 and R2. Here you go. Look, this is how you okay, now this here, I derive the equation of motion using Newton's second law. I'll leave you to work it out yourself, and really it is
Hell no,
I don't
I ain't
like
touching
Newton's second
newtons.
law when it comes to vibration analysis because it just requires too much dependence on the correctness of your free body diagram. Okay, but here I have redone the equation of motion using Lagrange equation again. In this case, because I have been given the radius of gyration of this mechanical system about the center of gravity, this allows me to then work out the moment inertia about the center of gravity. All right, which means that what I can do is to find out what's the second moment inertia, the moment inertia about the center of gravity, m, which is the mass of this bar, or the system, and k, which is the radius of gyration. Again, I need to know the item that would contribute to my kinetic energy, the mass, and the moment inertia about the center of mass. Okay. Now notice that this here is our generalized coordinate, the rotation of this system, and x is the displacement at the center of mass, which means that this will be a 2 degree of freedom system, x and theta. All right, so if I'm able to find out what is the thing, because the only mass is the mass of the mass of this body, because the body translates. You have a translational kinetic energy, and because it also rotates, and because we know that Ig is the moment inertia about the center of mass, half Ig theta dot square will be the rotational energy of this mechanical system. So here I have the kinetic energy of this mechanical system. Now, because I know that this is moving at the center of mass by an amount of x, I will be able to work out what is the displacement at k1 and k2. Okay, x, and the way that it's been rotated, this will give me the extension or the deflection of the spring. These are my spring deflection for K1, and that is a spring deflection for K2. No, because this is supported by the spring, so you don't have to consider the potential energy of the mass. This is not a pendulum. It's been the equilibrium position will be supported by the deflected spring K1 and K2. You don't have to consider the motion. Have a look at the example that we did, the very first example in week number 4. Yes. If the spring is horizontal and it's got nothing to do with the equilibrium, then you have to consider. Yeah. Then it becomes like a pendulum. Yeah. All right. Okay. Look. We'll try and work out how I get this. And if you have difficulty understanding this, send me an email and I'll go through it with you. What the hell? I'll do it now. Okay. Now this system here, it moves down x. Okay. This is K1. and K2 plus, and then we say that it rotates like this, theta. This is L1, L2. These 2 points, this will move X and X, whereas this here will be lifted up by L1 theta.
What's up, Abigail?
That will be compressed by L2
Welcome.
theta.
How are you going?
Which means that this, as far as this point is
Oh
concerned,
man, I really want to sleep from just
L1
fucking...
theta,
Whenever I start studying, I just want to fall asleep.
L2 theta.
It's cooked.
Okay. So this is how you calculate. This is how I derive the potential energy of this system. So now, again, because I have two generalized coordinate x and theta, I would need to assemble my Lagrange equation by considering x first and then theta. And here is my first equation when I'm considering x, and this is my second equation when I considered theta, which is I assemble them into my matrix.
Wait, but aren't you supposed to convert everything from theta into x anyways? Yeah, so if it rotates this way, theta in clockwise, left side goes up, right hand goes down. That makes sense in terms of moment. Okay, so that's the rotational. Here are the kinetic translational ones, and it will just fall down, right? It will have force down due to gravity, go down. Both sides go down. Okay, that makes sense actually. Oh damn. Middle of the night. Hey, what can I say? It's a good way to chill down, to absolutely wind down for the night, for the day. Oh yeah, bro, I actually have it up and running now. So, but there's also other bugs that have arose. Sometimes in terms of the log, is that even up to date? Yeah, in terms of the log, you can see here, if it thinks there's nothing, sometimes the logs are like bugged. And I think that's just a saving error, where when I save to Firebase, it like fucks something up because of the timing. Like, oh dude, I realize how much, or maybe I'm just writing shit code, but there's so much like timing errors. So in terms of order of functions when they are called. So if the save function to Firebase is called before the logs are even generated, which currently the logs are taking a lot more longer to generate because it needs to be, it's not like the OCR, first of all, it's not done locally, it's done on the cloud. So it takes like 5-10 extra seconds to go to the cloud and back. And also it depends on the person's internet. So I probably have to do some like async function, something that just like fixes the timing issues. There's a lot of them there.
This is what I have. Okay, x and theta. And this is my mass matrix, and this is my stiffness matrix. Right?
Yeah, exactly. There's like,
Now that I've done this,
I think currently we have like a fallback default log. So if when he tries to save, which when he tries to save too early, it would just return a fallback log and then save that, which the fallback log doesn't say anything. It just says like some random shit like default Foca if the app or whatever.
To illustrate
But I have to fix that. However, I'm a bit behind.
procedure.
I have an exam coming up, so I've got to do this shit first.
So this here is the equation of motion that that we've derived with the numerical values added on. Okay. Now the first thing that I need to do is to get the inverse square root of the mass matrix. This is what it is. Okay. There's a square root and that's the inverse square root. Then I do the mass normalization by pre and post multiplying the mass matrix by the inverse square root. And like I said, this is because of the use of this Cholesky decomposition. Okay, very useful. In which case, when you get your eigenvectors, it will be orthogonal. Now, this also requires us to calculate the mass normalized stiffness matrix, which I have here. What that means is, if I define x1, x, if I define a new generalized coordinate x bar and theta bar to be in terms of the inverse square root of the mass matrix, and this is our original coordinate or generalized coordinate. Okay, so this here now will be my mass normalized equation of motion in terms of the new generalized coordinate as defined by this matrix. Okay, now and then we said that we would, now that I've got this, I need to use this mass normalized stiffness to give me my natural frequency. I do the exact same thing, assuming that x will be in the form of a sine omega t and theta to be in terms of b sine omega t. Put them in. This is the matrix. Again, a and b can be equal to 0, but that's not a solution that we want. We want to find out the values of omega such that this system equation will be satisfied, and this omega will be our eigenvalues, as we said, and they will be omega squared will be eigenvalues, and that will be an indication of the natural frequency. Okay, because omega appears here. So when you do this quadratic equation in terms of omega squared, you find that there are two omega 1 and omega 2 like so. So omega 1 happens to be 6.5 and omega 2 is about 8.6 radians per second. Now that I have this...
Hold on. What? You only show omega here. There's no omega 1 or omega 2. Oh, okay. I guess when you solve it as a quadratic, you get two values. I guess that's what you're saying, right? Okay, let's test it out. What's my calculator? So if you simply just solve that equation, would you get 6.5 and 8.5? This calculator is so slow. Are you charged? I think you're charged. Come on, bro. Just fucking dot. There we go. 3 1 solve 50 minus x squared. 65.04 minus x squared minus 13.327 times 13 point. 0 for x. Yeah, okay, just solving for x.
I will be in a position to use this equation, which is defined by our top row. And this will be the basis of our eigenvector.
Wait. What the fuck was the point of solving eigenvalues? You're not even using it. And then you solve A and B.
Right? So A on B will be equals to negative 13 divided by 50 minus omega squared. So now for our first for our first natural frequency, omega 1 to be equal to 6.5, you find that A on B is equals to negative 1 on 0.581. So when B is equals to 1, oh, what did I do? A will be equals to 0.581. So this here will be my V1 and V2, and what I need to do is to normalize them. So this here is our eigenvectors from omega 1 and omega 2. Now, by normalizing them, I take the square of 1.7, square of 1, square root it, divide these elements by the magnitude, and similarly I do the same for this one. Will vibrate when it 2.9. All right. Lies this equation of motion. That
Oh, I'm fucking done. I'm fucking done for studying for the day, bro. I hate this shit. Oh, I fucking hate this shit. Alright, guys, I'm gonna see you in the next one. I hate this shit. I'm gonna go out and have a walk, actually. The weather's pretty nice.